네. You're good? Great. Let me just make sure the sound works.
One, two, three. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, perfect. Let me just.
You got the record on?
Yeah, let me just get the top.
Boker Tov, everyone. Very good Erev Shabbat. I'd like to thank Torah Anytime for putting these shiurim on their platform. In this week's Parsha, there is a mitzvah that perhaps is the most radical one, if I could use that word, which I just did, in all of the Torah. It's the mitzvah of Yovel. Shnat HaChamishim, 50th year. Yovel, it's Yovel. Now, Yovel really reorganizes society every 50 years. Because in the laws of Yovel, agricultural land was only on a leasehold. You could not buy land. We have today in Israel, a great deal of the property in Israel is on leasehold. The original owners were non-Jews, the church, sometimes the Jewish National Fund. And so they gave a lease for 50 years, or 70 years. And many of the leases are coming due now. If you own an apartment, or you think you own an apartment, on land that is only a leasehold, when the years of the lease expire, you have nothing. And therefore, there's an entire industry in the real estate in Israel today dealing with people who think they own property, which is on leasehold, and which is within 15, 20 years of expiring the lease. So to negotiate with them how they could really own the property, but it's going to cost money. So here we have an idea that really never existed before. And the Torah explains, you are sojourners, you are people that, you're guests. So you cannot sell property permanently because it's not yours. And that concept, that idea is really revolutionary, radical. Because the nature of people is that property is property. What I own, and I'm entitled to it. And here the Torah comes and says that after 50 years at the most, you will have to return the property to the original owners. And therefore, the real estate market is governed by a completely different set of rules than the ones that we are accustomed to. There's an exception to this rule in Yovel, which the Torah provides. The exception is Batei Orei Choma, urban property of cities that were walled. And there's another radical idea, which gives rise to what we call seller's remorse. I sell my apartment in the city, and you buy it for whatever the price is. Whatever the price is, you got a bargain. 6 months later, 8 months later, I say, I should never have sold that. Situations change. So the Torah provides that the seller has a year to go back on the sale. Within the year, he can say to the buyer, here's your money, and the deal is off. After the year passes, so then the sale is not renegotiated. And then it's over. But within a certain period of time, the sale is not final. So that also is a very, very different idea. Why should the sale not be final? So the Gemara, when it discusses this, introduces a number of psychological factors. Because at the end of the day, everything that has to do with money or with business, with commerce, has to do with the psychology of people. Sellers sell because they think the market will go down. Buyers buy because they think the market will go up. One of them is going to be wrong. We all know people here that say that, I could have bought a chavia for pennies. But that's not how our world works. So in effect, what the Torah is doing is giving you a 12-month extension to see whether or not your original decision was correct, whether you really want to sell. That inhibits buyers from buying, because the buyer is putting out the money right now. The fact that you give it back to him 6 months from now means that he will not benefit whatsoever from what he put out. So if we look at both of these rules, the rules regarding agricultural land, which is subject to the laws of the Yovel, and the sale of urban property, which is subject to a redo within 12 months, The Gemara discusses what about a leap year? Is it 13 months, 12? But however that is decided, both of these rules come to inhibit speculation and to inhibit permanent changes in ownership in property. Now, there's another rule that has to be taken into account here as well, and that is that Eretz Yisrael was divided. The Yovel is only in Eretz Yisrael. So if you bought in the 5 towns, you have nothing to worry about. In Eretz Yisrael, the country was divided amongst the tribes. There were 12 different tribes. The tribe of Levi did not have any property, but the tribe of Yosef was divided into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. And therefore, there were 12 different sections of the country. And the Torah, we're going to see later in the end of Chumash Bamidbar, this Shabbos is the end of Chumash Vayikra, but in the end of the Chumash Bamidbar, we'll see the incident of the daughters of Slavchad, who said the problem will be that we will marry men who are not from our tribe. And therefore, eventually, the share of our tribe in the land of Israel will be diminished, because it'll go according to what our husbands are. And they may be from Dan or Naphtali or Yehuda. And therefore, Moshe brought down the halacha that you should not initially marry outside of the tribe. Lo savir nachala mishevet l'shevet. Don't move the property from tribe to tribe. So this also is a tremendous inhibition against the purchase of real estate, because you have a very limited number of people who can purchase. 11 of the 12 tribes are excluded. So from all of this, the Meforshim point out to us that undoubtedly one of the purposes of the Torah was to prevent speculation and inflation of real property, to make it affordable, so to speak. This is a situation that exists in every Western society today, that property eventually becomes unaffordable. And then you have a societal dislocation, and you have all sorts of economic and social problems. So it's interesting that over the history of humanity, these ideas somehow have taken hold, even though the mitzvah of Yovel never was fulfilled. The Talmud teaches us that the Jewish people went into exile 70 years after the destruction of the first temple, because there were 70 Yovelos that were not observed. Approximately 500 years, the time that the Jewish people settled the country, at the time of the destruction of the temple, they didn't observe the Yovel. And from the Talmud, it is apparent that that was a very negative thing. And that's why the exile lasted 70 years, to atone for the 70 Yovlos. In Bayesheni, when the Jewish people returned to the land of Israel with Ezra, so there we are told that the majority of the Jewish people never came back to the land of Israel. Even though they built a temple, even though there was an independent Jewish state, even though the Hashmonaim were the kings, even though there was a Kohen Gadol, the majority of the Jewish people did not come back to the land of Israel. And the Gemara says that the halacha is that the Yovel is only possible when Rov Yoshveho Oleho, which is loosely translated. There are different opinions in halacha, but they're loosely translated that the majority of the Jewish people live in the land of Israel. How do we define the majority of the Jewish people? It's not clear. And what are the boundaries of the land of Israel? Also not clear. But the Yovel was never observed. Why would the Torah give you a mitzvah that's never observed? What purpose does it serve? So again, dealing the Mefarshim deal here with human psychology. The Torah is trying to teach us some sort of equitable system, how society should operate. And we find throughout human history the attempt somehow to achieve the goals of Yovel, even though there's no mitzvah of Yovel. And certainly for the non-Jews, no mitzvah of Yovel, and certainly for property outside of Eretz Yisrael, there's no Yovel involved at all. So, for instance, if we take our good friends of the Soviet Union and of the Communist Manifesto, so in effect, they did away with private property. They said you couldn't sell anything. Nothing belongs to you. Everything belongs to the state. By the state, they meant the nation as a whole. We're all equal co-owners. But as George Orwell pointed out in The Animal Farm, some pigs are more powerful than others. So you have here two conflicting views. One is we want everybody to be even. In order for everybody to be even, then everyone has to have nothing. And the other is the natural human drive to own property and to say that these are mine. And this is especially true because we have a whole series of halachas in the Torah of nachala, of inheritance. In other words, generational ownership. Not only that I want to own it, but I want it to pass to my son and to my grandson and to future generations. So you have here a clash of ideas. That on one hand, we want to make everything even. On the other hand, we're human beings. And human beings don't want anything to be even. They're not willing to deal with it that way. Further aspect of the Yovel which in our time is foreign, is that those that were avodim, so there were Jews that were felons, robbers, and they had to pay off what they stole, and they couldn't do it. So they, so to speak, paid it off in servitude. They were an Eved Ivri. Or sometimes a person on one's own initiative feels that it's better. He doesn't want any responsibilities. He's going to get 3 meals a day, and that's it. What does he want? So the Eved also remains 7-year term. If he says, I don't want to go out, so then in Parshas Mishpatim we read that his ear is pierced as a sign of servitude, v'avodo la'olam, and he's an eternal slave. And the Talmud teaches us la'olam only means 50 years, still the Yovel. When the Yovel comes, everybody goes out. There's no more slavery. Because the Gemara compares avodim, servants, to karka, to real estate. Whatever the halacha is regarding real estate, that'll be the halacha regarding avodim as well. So there's no permanence. There's no permanence in the status of being an Eved. The Torah darshan that the Gemara says, Ki avodai heim, they are my servants. So v'lo avodim la'avodim. Cannot be a servant to another servant. Now, the problem with all of this is that we have a Mishnah that describes to us the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when the servants were supposed to be freed. The Yovel is Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, and on Yom Kippur, V'avarta Shofar Ba'oretz, when the Bezdin blew the shofar, and we have that as a memorial that we blow the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. And that was the sign that they went out free. Not only they went out free, the master had to provide them with benefits. So from the Mishnah, it appears that there was a Yovel, because they describe what happened in the 10-day period between. The servants didn't work. They sat and they engaged in luxury and the goodness. So the whole idea of Yovel is enshrouded in mystery. Again, what is its purpose? Is its purpose to make everyone even? Is that the goal of our society? And the Torah does not provide for that. The Torah says just the opposite. The Torah says, Ki lo yechdal evyon mikerev haaretz. There will always be a lower class. There will always be people who are poorer than others. The Torah recognizes that as a fact. And in fact, the Torah does not even seem to be critical of it. That's just the way life is. Some people have more, some people have less. So all of this raises this great philosophical question regarding the Ovel. Well, did the Torah really want that society should start from zero every 50 years? And if it did so, why did they do so? Why did they feel that was necessary? So there are different streams in looking at this. One is a spiritual life benefits from having less and not more. A spiritual life benefits from having values more than having wealth or property. And by emphasizing this point, the Yovel teaches us that this is the type of life that we want to live. This is the type of society we want to create. So there never will be a society where everyone is even, where everyone is equal, because that would lead to tyranny, as we have seen so many times in human history. But it leads to a society of care one for another. Responsibility. And if a person, therefore, is able to see that one is only a trustee of wealth and of land and of property. So one of the great rules in life is that it's much easier to give away someone else's money than my money. It's one of the laws that lawyers in law school learn immediately, that you're not allowed to mention to a jury or to a judge that the defendant has insurance. Because if the defendant has insurance, so give him $1 million, give away $1 million, the insurance is going to pay it. It's the attitude of people. And that's why, for instance, almost all governmental agencies have laws that limit their liability. Because again, let the government pay it, as though I'm not part of the government. So you would have excessive settlements. So the Torah wanted us to think that way. To think of the fact that we are, first of all, that we are only temporary. So that even if I think I own everything, I'm not here all the time. I'm also on a limited lease. And if I think that way, and if I look at property that way, then it is much more likely that I will be a charitable, responsible, social person than if I look at it as all mine and that I'm entitled to it, I'm entitled to more of it, which leads to all sorts of problems in the world. And therefore, the Torah emphasized Kili Kol Haaretz. It's all mine. You're not regarding nations as well, wars for territory. The map of Europe has been redrawn how many times? Without any permanence. It's not yours. If it's not yours, then such ideas as Lebensraum and buffer states and all of that become absolutely non-applicable because it's not yours. And in fact, the basis for Eretz Yisrael, and that's why the Yovel is only in Eretz Yisrael, is because Eretz Yisrael was given to us by God. The promise to Avraham Avinu, to the Ovos. Since the one who possesses all of the land chose to give it to us, so then that's our claim to it. Our claim to it is nothing else. So out of this complex of ideas that Yovel raises, and the difficulties that it projects, how to translate these ideas into society itself, there are overreaching values that the Torah is teaching us. You're not a servant to someone else. You're my servant. You don't own property, it's my property. You can't deal with it on your basis because it's not yours. And that perhaps is the basic rule. Now, just to add one more point here, the Haftorah of Bahar, which we will not hear tomorrow, the Bahar B'chukosai go together, so we read the Haftorah is B'chukosai. The Haftorah of Bahar is that the prophet Yirmiyahu buys a right of redemption of property from his uncle, his cousin. And the Navi says to God, I don't understand. Yesterday you told me the city is being destroyed. I see the siege guns of the Babylonians outside Jerusalem. Yesterday you told me we're all going into exile. Yesterday you told me the temple's going to be burned. Yesterday you said it's all over. And today you say buy property. I mean, that's anti-Jewish. But that was the lesson. The lesson was that it's not going to be the Babylonians' property either. And that things are temporary. You have to look at things in 50-year batches. What will it look like? So by the Churban Bayis Rishon, look at it 70 years later. Oh, there's Ezra, and the Jews came back. Look at us, 1,800 years later, the Jews came back. That concept governs all of our approaches to economic society, to try and make it as just as possible, as fair as possible, as charitable as possible. Because the Torah promised us that will be an eternal problem that you may never cut to the end of. You may never have the solution, but to understand the values that are involved, that is the message here. I want to thank you all for coming. Next Friday, Amir Tzashem, we'll have a shiur on Bamidbar. Everybody should stay well and have a quiet weekend.
What's the title? Yovel? We got to put it off over here.